Welcome to the video of my data from 2023. So I'm Brad Einerson. I've been in computers since the 80s, but we'll get to that. And I'm currently dealing with data grief. I pressed the wrong button in PowerPoint and lost my entire recording. So I am re-recording this from the beginning. But you know, third time's the charm. So this entire thing is recorded in PowerPoint now, where you can do a little cameo and put it all together that way. And it seemed like it was easier than learning OBS. So there you go. That's where we're at in 2024 for PowerPoint. So this data is from 2023. It is late 2024. It's December 27th, 2024. But I need to get this video done so that when I do the 24th video, I can compare that data to this data. And as we go, you'll see why I want to do that. So I've been in computers for a long time. I'm not going to take you through the entire life story. But, when it comes to computers, I'm this old. So early 80s, XT machines. The PET was from the high school. And I then got into servers when I ran my own shop. I was at IBM and then ran my own shop. And I actually got triggered when I saw this photograph. So I have vacuumed the Plex servers grill, so it's all clean again. But I was into servers, but not really gaming machines, even though I played games in the 90s. But that all changed. That I got reintroduced to PC gaming at exactly the wrong time. The exact wrong time. The beginning of COVID. So me and everyone else wanted new computer hardware, and Ethereum had decided to get big, and it was proof of work. It went to proof of stake later. So it was proof of work. So you needed full hash rate GPUs to get good Ethereum results. They were disappearing. They just vaporized overnight. And while these are the cards that I would use in the 90s, this is the card that I got in December of 2020. So 3060 Ti, great card. Got it at MSRP, and I was hooked. I took that thing out of the box, and I had never seen anything like it. I guess if you were with graphics cards, GPUs all the way along the path, from those early ones to the modern ones, you'd be used to the progression. But I had never seen anything like that. It was the most beautiful piece of hardware I'd ever seen in my life. So then I started building computers, built quite a few of them during COVID, got good at sniping, got good at like getting those Newegg deals, to the point where I was able to like snag a 3070 on the app without a bundle, which was fantastic. And at the time, throughout the years, I've worked with Greg Stapels over at Signet Computers, and I'm giving him a shout out. I'm not a creator. This is just a fun video, but I'm giving him a shout out because if you need a computer store that has service, for your mom, for your dad, for your brothers or sisters or aunts and uncles, family members that you don't want to do tech support for, because if you're watching this video about FPS on different games and hardware, you're tech savvy, right? So, but if you don't want to do tech support for the rest of your family, for the rest of your life, hook them up with Signa. They have great support. They'll come to your house. They'll do all of the stuff to make everything work, and it's like magic. So yeah, tell Greg I sent you. So with all of that buying and selling, you end up with some inventory, and you want to test these things, right? For myself, I get a kick out of bigger bar better, like getting things to run. So these are my 3 test benches currently. This one's a 9800X3D, 5800X3D, and 7800 X3. Yes, yes, not in order. And I've built all of them myself. The the reason for that is I'm cheap. Um, I will spend money on hardware like GPUs that are not cheap, but otherwise I'm pretty cheap, and so I find that I can build these things easier than, say, buying a test bench. The two on the left have a KVM that goes to the 1440 screen. The one at the back there has a mobile 4K screen. Those mobile 4K screens for like $300, wow. Um, great little devices. Super handy on the laptop too when you're out. All right, so enough of the setup. We've got three segments today: synthetic tests, in-game tests, in-game benchmark tests, and actual play tests. So we're going to go through each of these. I'll have them bookmarked as chapters in the video itself. Okay, so let's get to these benchmarks. The synthetic tests are first, and the anatomy of what I'm going to be showing you today is the test itself. So shout out to Steve of Gamers Nexus and Jay of Jay's 2 Cents with their fight over Heaven. Heaven Valley and Superposition are still in my suite. So the anatomy of these slides is first the test, and then the resolution. We are all 1440 today. I have data on 1080 and 2160, but the reality is I'm not going to go through that today. I need to get this video done, and 1440 is fine. Then I've got sort of test settings. So how did I get to the settings I used in the test? So here for Heaven, of course, it's custom, ultra quality, tessellation extreme, anti-aliasing at X8, and then 1440 resolution. And then I've got the actual results themselves. I've got the GPU first and the CPU second. So unlike a real reviewer, because I'm not a real reviewer, unlike a real reviewer, they will have everything tested on the same machine. They'll have everything tested with the same install of Windows. They'll have everything tested with like the exact same components. And as we go through, you're going to see why they do that, because you can get results that are wildly different. But I don't do that. This is all data from 2023, from the entire year. I'm a hobbyist. I run these things in the background. And so I'm not going to do that. So what I've got is the GPU and the CPU, and I don't even really have like the motherboard and RAM set up. I know what the benches are in my data, but for these results, kind of not important. Then I've got the minimums and the averages. So the minimums are either 1% low or min. It's because it depends on the test, right? They have different labels for these things. But if it has a 1% low, I'll use that. If it doesn't, then I'll use min. Okay, and because it's 2023, all of this data, I was either on Windows 10 or 11 because I was sort of migrating my machines as we went. It's a fresh-ish install, so I don't use these for production. So these machines are all pretty clean, and I use DDU between different card brands. So going from NVIDIA to AMD or Intel, and so I'll use it, and I'll use DDU like for all three card brands, just to try and clean out the corners and vacuum the detritus. If it's the same brand, if it's NVIDIA to NVIDIA, I'll just reinstall the driver, right? So I'll just slap the card in, reinstall the driver, good to go. Usually it seems to work fine. I don't do any overclocking on the CPU or the GPU. I do Expo or XMP. You saw the test benches. This is mainly Expo. But I don't do any overclocking, and to the point where even the GPU BIOS, if there's like two settings for different BIOS, I'll leave it at standard, which is usually quiet mode. It's usually not performance mode. So everything you're seeing is a stock motherboard, stock BIOS settings, and stock GPU settings. So your mileage may vary, and you may have some performance that you can squeeze out of these machines that I didn't, but that's but by doing it consistently, I'm getting the same result that somebody would just plugging this thing into a machine. Early tests did use a hard drive. The operating system was always on SSD, but I've got newer SSDs, NVMe, and also just standard 2.5 SSDs for games, which is mostly fine, but I have a cheap Superpower. It's an SP, and it's not great. I did notice in Halo that my 1% lows were terrible, and I think it was because of the SSD, because when I moved it to a Team Group SSD, everything was fine again. So not super happy about that, but that doesn't touch this data. That hardware is later. I run the tests instead of sets of 3, but like rolling up a character in Dungeons and Dragons, I use maybe 4 tests and take the 3 most consistent. So Heaven and Valley, their first tests, they always run faster. Don't know why. It is what it is. After that, you get a more consistent result. Some other tests, they'll actually run slower at first, maybe because textures are being brought in or something like that. So I will tend to run 4 tests, take the best 3, which is usually the last 3, and run with that. The 2024 data, video in production, yeah, right. So I will do a 2024 video after this one's done, because I want to interlace it. I want to interplay it where I've got the 2024 data, compare it to the 2023 data, and hopefully show that I've learned to be more consistent. And you'll see why I say that in the next set of slides, or the rest of this presentation. So first one, Heaven. My lows are low. My lows are really low, and I have noticed this for years, really, that I don't get the same lows that Jay's 2 cents or folks like that get. And I don't know what it is that I'm doing, because like I said, I'm just taking everything stock. The only thing I'm doing is Expo and letting it run. So not sure. I'm still trying to figure that out. It's not MSI Afterburner, because these are built-in tests. They have their own numbers. In 2023, it wasn't the NVIDIA app, because that wasn't a thing then. It was GeForce Experience. So those 2 things are things I need to watch out for 25, but I cannot explain why my lows are so low. Anyway, my averages seem good, and you're going to see a very consistent pattern here. The 7900 XTX and the 4080 Super, they're going to be dicing it out for the top spots. Then the 3080 from EVGA, RIP EVGA, missed that company. And then the 6750 has a good grouping here. And then 3080 and 1080 Ti. The 1080 Ti being the GOAT, that card has really stood the test of time for the most part. Then we've got an A750. I don't have a B580. And there's been no word about a B750 or 770. So I'm worried about that. I had heard that they hadn't taped yet. And I'm going to interpret taped as all of your motherboard components on the chip shooter tapes that they use in the chip shooters. So if they haven't taped them, it's really unlikely they're going to produce them, because they're so far behind where they would be, and we've got AMD and NVIDIA coming in next. So yeah, so that's the anatomy, or so that's Heaven. Valley, same group. I forget the company name, but we've got 7900 up top. Notice the scale change. Don't be confused when the scale changes. 7900, 4080 Super, 3080. There you go. Pretty standard. 6750, and the 3060 Ti holding its own here, right? 1080 Ti still edging in front of it though. And the A750, not super performant for these old tests. I think Steve said they were 16 years old. Superposition is a different test. It doesn't have a 1440 preset, So I use the 4K preset and then go into custom and change it down to 1440. And here, the 4080 Super takes the lead, followed by the 7900, the 3080, and the 6750. Then next we've got the 1080 at still 126 FPS with 3060 Ti a little bit ahead of it. And the A750 is doing much better here than it was on those first two raster tests. I guess probably not that surprising because superposition is a newer test as far as I can tell. It's certainly more robust. Furmark, may as well ignore Furmark's min numbers because really it's such a simple test that average and min are almost the same. So, and they're also very high. So 4080 Super, 7900, 3080, and then the 6750. Not sure what was going on here with this one result, and I'm leaving these in. I'm not, any results that are weird, I'm not taking out. I'm leaving them in so that we can see that it's easy to get bad data in your spreadsheets and then later on not know why, right? I cannot tell you right now why this 70 is sitting there. And I'm wondering if it was like a 4K test that I mislabeled or something like that, but it is what it is. Then we've got the 1080 Ti at 109, doing well, and the A750 over 100 still, so it's doing well as well. There was talk early on with the A series launch that Intel had sort of optimized for some of the more popular tests. I wouldn't put it past them. Like, it seems like a reasonable thing to do from the company's perspective, and that might be what we're seeing there. So now we're into 3D Mark. So 3D Mark with TimeSpy, these are more reasonable tests, but they're not showing 1% mins. The two numbers for TimeSpy and all of the 3D Mark tests are test 1 and test 2. And so at the end of every test, they give 2 FPS numbers, as well as all of the scores. And so I have the 2 tests here. It's not a min number. So 7900 XTX, so TimeSpy being a raster test, doing well, mixing it up with 4080 Super, then the 3080, then the 6750, then the A750, again with the optimization, then the 3080 Ti. 3080 or 1080 Ti. 1080 Ti sitting above 60, so not bad, not bad. TimeSpy Extreme, in the future I am going to eliminate these crossover tests. And what I mean by that is TimeSpy is natively a 1440 test. TimeSpy Extreme is natively a 4K test. I should only run TimeSpy for 1440 and only run Extreme for 4K and not crossover. What I'm doing here is I've got it set up and then just change the resolution to 1440. So it works, but there's no reason to do it. It's not going to tell me anything better than just the original TimeSpy. So 7900, 4080, Super, and 3080 and 6750, and one odd 6750 way at the bottom, making me think that maybe I forgot to change it to 1440 here and mislabeled it. And then the A750 and the 1080 Ti. Oh, and then down at the bottom here, oh yeah, 3060 Ti way at the bottom, probably also mislabeled this one. So got to be careful. It's easy to mislabel your data, and a year later you're not going to know what happened. Port Royal. So now we're into ray tracing. It's a ray tracing test, and the 4080 Super takes the lead. Not surprising, right? For ray tracing. Then 7900, a few frames behind. But notice here, the 4080 Super, a very powerful card, is still just over 80. The 7900 is just over 70, and the 3080 from EVGA is just over 50. Then we're down into the 6750 at the 30 FPS range, A750. And our 1080 Ti has met its match with Port Royal. Ray tracing was not envisioned for the 1080 Ti, and so its results are based on software, and they're terrible. Don't know why the 3060 Ti is so low, or well, the 1070 I'm not surprised, but the 3060 Ti I'm not sure why it's like 5.9 frames per second. That doesn't make much sense to me. Some configuration error there. Speedway, a somewhat newer test. Also pretty sure there's some ray tracing in there, so 4080 Super, 7900, 3080. There's the pattern again, right? But look at the numbers, they're so low. 74, 63, 46. Then we're mixing it up with the 6750 and the AA750. And then we've got the 3060 way down in the 22 range. So yeah, not too surprised for this test. The 1080 just gave up. It threw in the towel and said, nope, nope, not doing it. So Steel Nomad, a much newer test. Remember, this is from 23. So in 24, we'll have a full set of data for this. And it defaults, again, Steel Nomad. Speedway defaults to 1440, I think. Steel Nomad defaults to 4K, so I just turn it down to 1440, run a custom. Might still do that. Might still do that. And yeah, 4080 Super is like in the lead. Not too surprising, but good. All right. So now for the game built-in benchmarks. So we've got all our synthetics out of the way. And now we've got the game built-ins. And the synthetics and the built-ins are the majority of my testing. Again, it's a hobby. I don't have a whole bunch of time for it. So I don't bother playing the game to get the numbers if it has a built-in benchmark. Yes, that is not as good a test. However, it's a much better test for somebody who has other things to do with their time, like job, because I don't make money at this. So our first game is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So pretty simple setup on this one, pretty hard to get wrong. Ultra high, set to 1440. It always wants a reboot if you do. The resolution's fine, but as soon as you hit the graphics settings, it wants a restart of the game, which is fine. Very annoying game to test because it's got like an 8-second delay. Every time you try and get into the game, it says it's looking for updates or something. Extremely aggravating, but whatever. My 1% lows are not great in these games. Later games, they're better, but these ones, it is what it is. Already talked about it. The averages are pretty good, though. So you can see here the 7900 XTX is mixing it up with the 4080 Super. I cannot explain the 30 or the 20 frame difference from this top result from the 7900 XTX with the 7800 X3D. I cannot explain that compared to the 4080 Super. And the settings on this game are simple enough that it's unlikely, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely it was a settings difference. Again, I can't go back in time to 23 and figure out what I was doing. So, but even if you disregard that, we've got the 4080 Super and the 7900 X3D mixing it up at around 130 plus frames. Then we've got the 3080 mixing it up with the 6750. I think these games do like AMD, so that's not too surprising. And then we've got the 1080 Ti squeaking in just above 60 frames. And if you're going to have a cutoff, 60 frames seems fine. And so 1080 just squeaking in there on ultra settings, remember. So these are like no compromise, ultra settings, all rasterized. Then we've got sort of a lower result for the 6750 at one point. Not sure what was going on there. And the A750 was just not happy with this game. Now, it might be much better now. In 2023, the drivers were coming out monthly for a while. And this game was not, I think, in the first set of games that were supported. I suspect the A750 will be much better now. When I do the 24 data, it'll be fun to see where it sits. So Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I actually want to play this game, because who doesn't want to be a Viking? Well, okay, the reality would suck, but the game is probably fun. So same thing though, settings pretty easy, but the 1% lows terrible. And we've got the 7900 XTX and then the 4080 Super. So dicing it up at the top there. 3080, a much cleaner sort of breakdown this time. 3080 next, 6750 next. Then the 1080 Ti, still 77 frames. Like, good for you, 1080. And then the A750 may have been later in, either it was later in the year and the drivers have gotten better, or the drivers had focused on Valhalla being a newer game than Odyssey being an older game. Far Cry, we've got Far Cry 5 and 6. Far Cry has pretty simple settings as well, and the 1% lows here are much more reasonable. So this is something you would see, Hardware Unboxed, Gamers Nexus, Jay's 2 Cents, right? These are 1% lows that I can stand behind and say, yeah, this makes more sense. I can't tell you why the other ones are lower, but again, it's a simple setup. It's not like I was doing anything complex. So that means other people in market, other people with their computers are experiencing those results. 4080 Super first, then the 7900. 3080 sneaking in there between a couple of 7900s. The one setting on the Far Cry systems that you do have to watch out for is it's a resolution scale. So they will try, with some of the higher end cards, they will try and resolve at like 1.2 or 1.3, like higher than actual resolution, and bring it down to improve quality. So I always have to go in and set that to 1, make sure it's at 1.0. So if there is weirdness here, it could be that. Like that maybe this 7900 XTX was set for 1.2 and I didn't notice. And then we've got the 6750 and the 3080 dicing it up again. And then we've got the 1080 Ti at over 100 frames. So, Far Cry 5, I mean, it came out after the 1080 Ti, but not that much after. So, right, old game, old card, doing well together. A750, it's not a hard game to run. It's at 90 frames. So, there you go. Far Cry 6, similar result, same problems about the resolution scaling. And so we've got 1080 Super mixing it up with the 7900, and one 3080 sort of sitting in there. So I'm not sure about this 7900 result. Maybe I'd done the resolution scaling problem. And 6750, and then the 3060 creeping up into the 6750 territory. So interesting that it really likes that game. 1080 Ti at just over 60 and A750 just over 60. So that's good. F1. So remember I said I was cheap? So F1 2020. Yeah, there's a 2024. I'm not going to buy it just to do a hobby. I can get numbers out of 2020. So 1% lows are looking good. Frames are looking great. Over 400 for the 4080 Super. And then we've got the 7900 XTX, 3080, 6750, 1080 Ti holding on over like 127 frames. So playable, right? So playable on that card. Not, these racing games aren't super difficult to render, but good to see. Cyberpunk 2077 and CD Projekt Red, I think is the company name. Probably getting it wrong. Those are the components though. Red, CD, some sort of project. And Cyberpunk 2077, I swear to goodness that one of their tactics is to have the best test so that they get featured on all of the, big channels all the time. So the name is out there. Hey, look, here we are. I don't have Phantom Liberty. Remember, I'm cheap. So The settings on this one, a little bit more complex. I go in and I set resolution at 1440, then I set ultra high, then I go in and turn off all of the ray tracing and all of the DLSS FSR stuff. And so that ends up with a pretty consistent set of settings. And we are, we're mixing it up with the 7900 and the 4080 Super because it's all raster, right? It's not ray traced. And then we've got the 3080, 6750. So I've got some nice semi-consistent results here, A750. And then the 1080 Ti is struggling, right? So games like this is where the 1080 Ti struggles, but just turn down the settings. The game doesn't really look that different as far as I can tell. Dirt 5, basically an arcade racing game. And as such, the settings are super easy. I don't use native. I always specify the exact pixel count, so 10 or 1440 in this case. And then I run the internal benchmark, and the results are good. They're solid. So 7900, 4080, 3080, and 6750. Very consistent results. A750 doing well, over 60. And for a game like this, over 60 would be fine. 1080 Ti, really close to that A750. So Dirt 5, easy to run. Horizon Zero Dawn, it gives you a lot of data when you run these tests. So it's another game that's fairly easy to set up. The version I have, I don't have Forbidden West. Version I have does not have any ray tracing, I think, and so there's no issues there. Don't have to turn stuff off, and I use the GPU render number at the end of the sequence. So we are looking at good, good mins, good consistent numbers, and the 7900 and the 4080 sort of tossing, dueling it out at the top there, 3080, 6750. Then 3060 doing pretty well. That could be a RAM thing, right? That could be a video RAM thing. Then the 1080 Ti, over 80. 1080 Ti still over 80 at ultra settings. So good work there. A750 actually doing pretty well too. I wonder, either this was in the first set of games supported or this test I ran later in the year. Red Dead Redemption 2. So at 1440, this one is harder to set up. So go into the settings, go one by one, and just set them as high as possible, and then make sure no ray tracing, no DLSS or FSR. And pretty reasonable results, although high variability on the 7900s. Then the 4080 Supers were better, and then the 3080 was good. But we're down at below 60 at this point, right? So the 7900 was 98 or 106. Then the 4080 Super was just over 60. I guess this game likes AMD. Tell me if I'm wrong. And then 3080 down below 60, and now we're into the 30s for the 6750. So it's, even a first-person game rapidly becoming unplayable. A750s, or at least they're hanging with the 6750, but not great numbers. But again, you can turn down the quality and no one's going to notice. Yeah, 25 frames for the 1080 Ti, so it's not super happy there. So I've got Rise of the Tomb Raider and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Rise of the Tomb Raider gives you this sort of chart of data after the test. It gives you a set of 3 max, and then a single average, and then a set of 3 min. And so what I do is I use the average number for average, and I average out manually the 3 mins to give you the min number. So, and the important thing for both Rise and Shadow is the anti-aliasing. It's easy to miss that 4x SSAA, and I think that's happened to me at least once in this chart. So here I've got the 7900 way higher, like 247 compared to say 150 for the 4080 Super. Almost guarantee that first result. You may as well just ignore it, because that's me missing the 4x anti-aliasing and running without it. Then you've got the 7900 XTX just below at 135 compared to the 4080 Super. Then there's a 3060 sitting in there, which again, almost certainly missing the anti-aliasing, and some 6750s, somewhere between 59 and 66 frames. And hey, like Hardware Unbox showed it, you can get different results just from reboots of the same machine. So I think we need to expand our concept of margin of error for these tests. And the 3080 is down at 60 frames. Not a great result for the 3080 there. Yeah, not sure what's going on there, because I would have thought the 99 up above was a more reasonable result for Rise of the Tomb Raider. So maybe left it at 4K, but I don't know. I can't explain that one. Then Shadow, Tomb Raider, again the minimums, easy peasy. And notice that Rise of the Tomb Raider, I was sort of all over the place. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I'm more consistent, and I'm hoping that when I look at the 24 data compared to the 23 data, that is consistently more consistent, if you get my meaning. Because my mins are nice and consistent, my maxes or my averages are nice and consistent. 4080 Super, then the 7900, then the 3080, then the 6750, and then the arrows backwards, and then the 1080 Ti, still over 60, 62. All right. So I'm hoping the 24 data is much more like that. Watch Dogs Legion, pretty good consistency as well. This game also is pretty easy to configure. You set it to ultra high. It doesn't have a lot of secret settings waiting to get you. So 7900, mixing it up with the 4080 Super, then the 3080, then the 6750, and then my arrows are still backwards, and then the 1080 Ti, mixing it up with the A750. Down around 50 frames. It is playable. I mean, I played Wing Commander in the 90s with like 12 frames per second or something, so my standards might be lower, but they are below 60, so there you go. Just turn down some settings. Guardians of the Galaxy I got later in the year, so only a few tests. This one, similar to the Ubisoft games, it has that settings up front, but it doesn't seem to have any hidden ones. It seemed easier. And 4080 Super, mixing it up with the 7900, and then the 6750, and then the 1080 Ti still at 85 frames. So Guardians, easy game to play. Now, we're into games that require MSI Afterburner. So the previous games all gave me the numbers straight up. Grand Theft Auto does not. It'll run the benchmarks and you can see the numbers flipping on the screen, but it doesn't give you like a summary at the end. So what I do is I wait for the final sequence with the jet and the mammoth, the Hummer, and the running into the tanker at the end. So I wait for that sequence at the end, and I run MSI Afterburner to gather those numbers. I did not know until recently about the power measurement situation with MSI Afterburner. So the mins might be artificially low. In 25, I'm going to pay attention to that, as well as the NVIDIA app. However, having said that, we've got 7900 and 4080 sort of dicing it up at the top here between 116 and 136. Then we've got the 3080. Then we've got the 6750 with the 1080 Ti sort of creeping in there in the center. I'm kind of not surprised about. Grand Theft Auto is an old game, and 70 frames for a 1080 Ti feels right. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was not just a real result. A750 was not optimized for this. It may be better now. It probably is better now. I mean, GTA 5 is so popular. I would bet that if I look at my 24 data, that the A750 will be better now. Then Total War 3 Kingdoms. I actually have a couple more that I got on the Steam sale. So for 25, I might do a different benchmark, but this is Three Kingdoms, third benchmark in the list, and nice and consistent. I mean, this is a strategy game, kind of top-down, easy to run. We're looking at almost 200 frames across the board for the 7900 and the 4080. 3080 next, and then the 1080 Ti coming up over 100, so that's a good showing. Then the 6750 and the A750. The A750 below 60 for this type of game does not matter. It's a top-down strategy game. All right, so now we're into the game actual play benchmark. So this is me finding some consistent place in the game, playing it until I go insane, and recording with MSI Afterburner the results. All results are with power monitoring on, because I only just recently found out that that can affect FPS numbers, so your mileage may vary. So let's see what we got. Okay, Doom Eternal. So I consider Doom Eternal a casual game because it's not a competitive shooter, and it's got this combination of destroying demons and solving 3D puzzles. It's like super fun, and you can pick it up and then put it down. Like, it's not a long-term commitment. In any event, though, I love Doom Eternal. I loved Doom back in the day too. I have a story about playing Doom 2 in the IBM amphitheater in the Toronto lab, with like the huge audio going and the big projector showing it, because that was a Christmas party thing apparently. So anyway, Doom Eternal, love it, great game, and high frame rates. Oh my goodness! So the 4080 Super and the 7900 XTX, dicing it up. But look at the variability. Oh man, I did some tests in 23. Looking at the variability from different regions, like different areas. And in 23, I hadn't really nailed down the two saved campaign places that I have now. So 24, the number should be way more consistent. But 23, all over the place. I mean, we're from 315 to 472 on the 4080 Super. So it is what it is. Anyway, lots and lots and lots of frames. So let's get the arrows going here. So in the current one, I have two save locations. Back in 23, it wasn't quite the same. The numbers are huge, and the 1% aren't bad. So you can see there the difference. And then 3080 after the top guys. But notice the 3080 is like, it's close. It's close to that low number for the 4080 Super. And 2 to 300 for the 3080. It's holding its own. The 6750 is also fine, over 200. 1080 Ti, 147. Like, it's completely playable. And remember, this entire thing is at Ultra Nightmare settings. For Doom Eternal, if it doesn't have enough VRAM, it won't just go to regular RAM. It'll just say, no, can't play it, reduce your settings. I tried it on a 2060 back in the day, and I just had to reduce settings, and that was the way it was. So, is what it is. So Halo Master Chief. So this is not Halo Infinite. Probably have that for 25. This is Halo Master Chief Edition or something. So it's the old Halo, and it's Firefight, localhost on Reach. Yeah, it Firefight, localhost, Reach, and then just more enemies until you die. And for this one, for Doom, remember at the beginning I said I do like 3 or 4 tests per. For Doom, I do 2 tests. And I mean, I've done more in the past, but I do 2 tests standardized now. And for Halo, I do often 1 test. The numbers are fairly consistent, and just doing 1 test, like, I only have so much time. So if I'm going to sit down and play a game, I just want to get my MSI Afterburner numbers and move on. So we can see the 4080 Super, somewhat sensitive to CPU between the 5800 and the 7800 X3D. Then the 3080, then on a 5900X. That 5900X, so that CPU inside of the Tower 100 with the Asus Strix ITX board, it performs really well. It's a magical combination. I can't explain it really. Like, I mean, it just performs really well. So can't say enough good things about that. So then we've got the 7900 down at the 300 level, and I mean we're talking 300 to 400 FPS. So none of these are a problem. And let's see. Oh, I've got to catch up with my arrows here. 7800 X3D, and then 1080 Ti over 300 for the 1080 Ti. Kind of makes sense for that game. 6600 is up over 300. I mean, you don't see that very often. Then we've got a couple of weirdnesses down here. 7900 XTX and 3080 down into the 164s. This is one of those games where I'm going to be interested in how my 24 data compares to my 23 data, because the settings for the game aren't complicated. There's only a few settings, but they're not standardized like other games are, right? I mean, in other games you'll go in, it'll be like ultra high, and then maybe some like detail things for, backgrounds or textures or whatever. For Halo, it was your resolution enhanced and then set for all games. And that's pretty much it. And so it may be that there were variances in there that I didn't notice when I was setting up the game. Moto 20. Okay, so I'm a motorcyclist. I've ridden since I was 12, which is 1978, and I love bikes. And so I've got a number of motorcycle games. Moto 20 is the one I use for benchmarking, but it seems to have a cap. It seems to have a 200 FPS cap. So sure, everything from the 3080 and up is 200. 6750 down at 167. 3080 down at 167 as well. Okay, and again, notice the 3080 on the 5900X was 200. And the 3080 on the 7800X 3D was 165. So, can I explain that? No, not really. The settings on the game are not complicated. It's possible, I suppose, that the settings didn't take, because these, who makes these games? I forget, but F1 and MotoGP, they're made by the same company, and you often need to restart the game between updating the settings. So it is possible that 3080 is a false reading there, where I updated the quality settings and it didn't take and it didn't tell me. So that's possible. Here, I'll catch up with my arrows. There we go. 6750. And then 1080 Ti, still over 100, 144, completely playable. And the fact, to the previous point, the fact that I don't notice if the settings, like, the screen has been set to 720 instead of like 1440 or something like that, or the textures are down. The fact that I don't notice just tells you, for me anyway, you might be more sensitive, but tells you how you can enjoy these games at way, way, way lower settings than we test at. In any event, though, even the 1070 was at 78 frames. So, and I've gotten better at it in 2024, so I don't wipe out other people as much. It's not a super simple game to master. Battlefield 5 you will not see in the 24 data. Halfway through 23, it stopped responding when using MSI Afterburner. Paul's Hardware confirmed this. He found the same thing because he used to use Battlefield 5 a lot for his benchmarking. So these are sort of orphaned numbers, really. Don't know why the 3080 was higher than the 7900 XTX and the 4080. So there was some sort of settings thing going on there. So, it is what it is. Okay. Next. Okay, this one though is still active. Call of Duty. So not Call of Duty Go. Yeah, COD Go? Anyway, whatever. It's not the Call of Duty that everybody else plays. It's World War II Call of Duty. Um, the the beach landing, um, the Allies beach landing in this game is really good. It's really well done. Um, there was a game way back in the 90s that used, I'm going to say, um, the Company of Heroes. Anyway, it used a different engine, and Day of Despair was actually, I think, a fan creation, and it had a beach landing. And this is the first production game that's had a beach landing as good. It was, if you've watched Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan, this beach landing is basically a mirror of Saving Private Ryan. It's really well done. You will not survive most of the times you try and run up that beach, but you'll eventually get there. Kind of sobering. So anyway, I've got a saved set of settings for the local, um, sort of the local run. Um, and so it's PvP, but 17 of the PvPs are bots, and I just run it with the same settings all the time. So with 17 bots, you would expect the CPU to actually take a hit, but it doesn't really. I mean, just look at these results. 7900 and 4080, sort of mixing it up with the two different CPUs. 3080 right in there, and then the 6750, and then a lower 3080, which makes me think that maybe I misconfigured something on the top 3080, but I don't know. The settings aren't that hard to configure, so I don't know. 1080 Ti over 160 frames, so that's a good result, right? That's a good result. And the A750 struggling a bit, um, a few stutters and stuff, but we have it. Microsoft Flight Simulator is not a game to use for benchmarking. I'll just say it. You can't, like, it's possible to set up the graphic settings consistently, but they're very obtuse, and the game is so slow that it hardly matters anyway. This 4080 Super result in the top, almost certainly that was a DLSS setting that I left on by mistake. The next ones, though, are more consistent, 90 frames, 101 frames. And this is a discovery flight in a Cessna over New York City, back and forth. So, I mean, the test itself is very consistent. And then I do another one usually, like Bora Bora or something else. Um, one of my most fun things doing with Microsoft Flight Simulator is if I'm going on a trip, I'll use Flight Simulator to emulate the flight from point A to point B in real time. I just leave it running in the background, just like heaven. Huh? But just for fun, it's a personality quirk. So, and then the 3080, 6750, the 1080 Ti. Okay, 1080 Ti is at 43 frames. That's fine for MS Flight Simulator. 40 frames a second. That's completely fine. This thing is not fast paced. And there are, though, you can get into situations like this A750 where you've got major stutters and pauses, and that's no good. So when you see those, that's a problem. Last of Us, also a good test, had reasonable mins on this one. Very consistent here, right? So I've got a certain area. I'm just about ready to take the kid, I forget her name, to the dragonflies, and there's this one sort of boulevard where I run back and forth. So it's not CPU intensive. There's no NPCs, but it gives me at least consistent results. So 7900, and then the 4080, then the 6750 with the 3080 sort of mixed in there. A750 not, well, I mean, okay, I was going to say not doing too bad, but it's 30 frames. So, yeah, no. And the 1080 is, with The Last of Us, the 1080 Ti is meeting its match in terms of what it can actually do. how much it can compute. Starship Troopers, again, not a game to test on. Okay, I'm saying it here, I like Starship Troopers Extermination better than Helldivers. Starship Troopers was first. Starship Troopers is authentic. The cultural cynicism, right, baked into the game was original to the Starship Troopers movie. Helldivers has the same cynicism, and it's hilarious, but Starship Troopers did it first in the movie. That's all I'm going to say. So the beta, though, it's all over the place. The code changes all the time. I'm not even going to say that I was like configuring things differently here, because the code changes so often and the lethality of the game changes so often, and the number of other players in the game and all those variables just cause these numbers to be very, very different. So your mileage may vary. Also, the 1080 Ti was at 30 frames, so not a great thing. Now, for consistency, though, Starfield. As Linus on Linus Tech Tip says, dozens of people play Starfield. So it's too bad too, because it had such good hype, such promise. So ultra high, easy settings to set up, and I made my way to Jemison, and I didn't progress, like I haven't progressed in the game since then. So I do 3 walks around Jemison. So the other ones, I'm doing like 1 or 2 tests. Starfield, I'm doing 3 walks around Jemison, and because it's so consistent, I'm getting consistent results. And so 4080 super first, 7900 next, then the 3080, then the 6750. The A750 is unplayable, or at least it was in 23 when I tested it. It's hopefully better now, but the stutters and pauses were just unplayable. And the 1080 Ti is like, it's out of its league at this point. Helldivers 2 I got late last year. So 24 data will have lots of Helldivers, but I only have a bit here. 6750 and 1080, but doing a good result, like over 60 for the 1080. So and the 1% lows are doing well too. So console coming over. So summary. I started in 2021 benchmarking. I was terrible. And in 2022 I got more consistent. And in 2023 I got more consistent. And in 2024 I got more consistent. So there are issues with my 23 data. When I get to my 24 data, I'm hoping that I can show that those issues are getting better. This is not a business. I don't have written SOPs, standard operating procedures. And I try and remember all the configuration steps, and I have notes in my spreadsheets talking about how to configure it. And if I remember to do everything, I can get it done consistently, but it's tough. So that's one element. And then, Hardware Unboxed showing that variances, even on a Windows reboot, can be an issue. Also, and I know this is bad, but I play the game the way it would be played at home. I don't turn off Windows updates. I don't worry about any of that stuff. And I'm sure if Windows freaks out in the background, at some point my data can be bad. So that's an issue too. That part though, I don't think I'm going to change. I'm going to just try and keep more consistent with my SOPs, and we'll see where the 24 data shows us. And then I'll decide what's happening in 25 in terms of a few new games I got for the winter sale and things like that. So, also I have a 4090 now. So that was the last GPU that I bought a while ago. So the 24 data will have that mixed in as well. So that's it. I'm Brad. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time with the 24 data compared to the 23 data. Bye for now.